Hello students, this week we'll be talking about scale and proportion in art. Scale can be fun in art because it allows us to reconsider a small everyday object on either a gigantic scale or take an object that's really big and break it down to such a small scale that we see it in a new light. Here's one of my favorite pieces of scale and proportion that I experienced at the Broad Museum in Los Angeles. Very fun piece. Everyday small objects that are transformed into massive giant objects, allowing us to rethink them. And then proportion, which deals with the relative size of an object within an image, or ratio that it looks like it makes sense. Proportion can be very challenging for figure drawing artists who need to get the body all in the right proportions. So a lot of times when you're starting out, you'll expand the head or make the legs too small. So it takes a lot of practice to get the proportions exactly right. And we'll discuss how the history of proportion has evolved from ancient Greek times, where they came up with a canon of proportions. All right, so enjoy the lecture this week. Thank you. We perceive scale in relation to our own size. Artists often ensure all parts of an artwork are in correct proportion, but they also use discordant proportions to express meaning, as we'll see. Scale and proportion, part of the principles of design. Basic definition of scale: the size of an object relative to another object. Here's some pottery in a museum. You can see it's a smaller scale. Artists make conscious choices about scale. Depending on the message they want to communicate, they will also consider the cost, time, and location available. This is a sculpture by Theodore Gall, Plaza Facets. Let's look at this figurative sculpture as an example of the three different types of scale we're concerned with. Scale, as I said before, is generally compared to the human form because we think that we're the most important things in the world. This is the Anthropocene, human-dominated era. The difference in proportion can create a new dialogue and meaning with the piece. So imagine if Theodore Gall's sculpture here is handheld, then you look down on it, it's small. Imagine if it was the same size as you, so the head would be equal 1-to-1, how that would change the meaning. And then imagine if it was monumental. So if you're the person here and you can actually walk through it and this head is twice the size of you. Each one would create a different dialogue and meaning. So let's talk about monumental scale. This is the Lechan Buddha. It's the largest Buddha sculpture in the world from the 8th century. It's 233 feet tall and it's carved straight into this sandstone rock. So a lot of times when you have a massive sculpture or impressive scale, you consider that monumental, and the scale usually indicates heroism or epic values. A lot of times war monuments will be of epic scale to talk about bravery, larger than life figures. This is the Hokusai Great Wave, talking about the scale of the wave. Remember, we know that the mountain is much bigger than the wave, but we have the wave as a monumental scale within the picture to dwarf the mountain and the boats, emphasizing its menace. Ron Mueck, he does these lifelike sculptures out of fiberglass and latex. You can see here some people here. This is a little boy. So he takes regular objects and tries to reproduce them exactly, mostly figurative objects. So how does that change your perception when you see an object that big and that realistic looking? They almost become monstrous. This one is a meditation on death. All these giant skulls, you can walk through them, look at them. And there's a very interesting video on how he makes these skulls, and you can watch that in the supplementary materials. Monumental scale here, we have the Statue of Liberty. This is the Statue of Liberty made by Gustav Eiffel. It's 305 feet tall with the pedestal. Again, monumental scale. Statue of Liberty is a statue of Lady Liberty, so a gift from the French to commemorate the liberty that America stands for and democracy. Here's ceramicist Jean Kaninko. He makes these gigantic shapes of heads out of ceramics with weird polka dots and stripes, bold colors. These large-scale works can have a dramatic impact on the viewer, both in terms of their physical presence and their ability to transform the spaces they inhabit. Kaninko's willingness to work on such a grand scale allows his art to interact with the environment and the architecture in powerful ways. His sculptures and installations often play with negative space, altering the viewer's perception of the surroundings and creating immersive environments. Think about when you're in the room with a gigantic head, it make you much more aware of the space around you. And then switching from monumental scale to the handheld or even the microscopic. This is Willard Wiggin, and he makes these sculptures on the end of a pinhead. So this is very, very tiny, and he uses microscopes to carve them. There's a video on these that you can also watch on Willard Wiggin. So with this one, it's so small that you even have to have a magnifying glass to view his art. Also small scale, Salvat Fidei, and these are on the edges of pencils. So they're sculpted out of the graphite on the end of pencils. This is Mrs. James Ward Thorne, who created these 1 to 1/12. So 1 inch equals 1 foot replicas of rooms. They're Victorian rooms, all different kinds of rooms. If you go to the Institute of Art in Chicago, there is a permanent collection of these in the basement that you can go to and see all these different rooms she created on this teeny tiny scale. Claes Oldenburg and Claes van Bruggen did this match cover made out of steel, aluminum, reinforced plastic, and painted with polyurethane enamel. Claes Oldenburg does a lot of sculptures that have to do with mass culture, items that have no significance, but they become significant through the size that he magnifies. So small overlooked objects are transformed by the artist into monumental sculptures. So he pokes fun while expressing admiration. And Claes Oldenburg believes that items of mass culture express truths about modern life. So when you see, you may not think about the form of a matchbook, but when you see the form of a matchbook on a monumental scale, it forces you to consider what that form is. You may have seen this one too, Claes Oldenburg and Claes van Bruggen. Claes van Bruggen is Claes Oldenburg's wife, so they make sculptures together. This one's in Minneapolis, the cherry on the spoon, very famous and beloved piece there. Claes Oldenburg's ice cream cone dropped on top of a building in Cologne, Germany. And this one was a little more of a matchup, a caterpillar on tracks. It has a lipstick stuck to like a tank track or a caterpillar track, making a connection between the mass culture items that we use and the fact that our way of life needs to be procured through industrialization and war. So Claes Oldenburg, everyday objects, makes us think a little bit about those everyday objects by seeing them on a monumental scale. Maurice Catalan, who did the banana piece, also did this giant sculpture of a cat skeleton. Cat's an everyday animal that you see. Seeing its skeleton on that kind of scale is a little scary. This is Jean-Francois Millet, The Gleaners. This is a very interesting piece and was extremely controversial. Millet's contemporaries were hostile towards him when he painted this. And the reason why is because he uses scale to comment on the class system in 19th century France. Large-scale paintings were typically reserved for religious subjects, royalty, and other figures of political and cultural importance. But in his picture, these three women who are lowly peasants picking up the last of the wheat fields are elevated to a scale and prominence in this picture. So he's basically deeming them as important and worthy of painting. So at that time, there was so much backlash over that. You can't paint poor people. They're not important. They shouldn't be big. They shouldn't be prominent in a picture. And you actually see this man on the horse, who's probably the overseer or representative of the landowner, is very small in it. So the three lowly peasants, the manual laborers, are elevated to the position of prominence. That's why it was so controversial in the 1800s France. Tahal Shan Ok, that is the ruler in this picture depicted here. So as you see, he is much larger than these other two characters in this relief because he is held in the highest status in the social order. Tahal Shan Ok is visually more dominant, and he is depicted as the water lord, Cancun. That's where this takes place. So the This is a strategy you'll often see in ancient art is the most important god or ruler is going to be the biggest in the picture, and their subjects, the lesser important people, will be depicted as smaller. So this is Mayan civilization, but we'll also see it here in Egyptian civilization as well. This is a relief from the Temple of Amun. As you can see here, this is actually a depiction of Ramses crushing his opponents. You can see he's much bigger, he's like a giant crushing them. See him right there. And then that's his, this is one of his generals, and then this is just a regular soldier, and these are his opponents being crushed. So I guess the opponents being crushed are a little bit more important than this subordinate down here. In religious depictions, Jan van Eyck uses hierarchical scale to communicate spiritual importance. So Mary and the Christ child appear larger than normal human beings. This symbolizes their central importance in the Christian religion. Mary is believed to be the Virgin Mother of Christ. So this is a massive church, but look, Mary's too big to even fit through these doorways, which we know humans would probably be about this high or smaller. Maybe those are some more regular sized people over there. So Mary is shown to be this giant force within this painting, much bigger than she should be in real life, totally out of proportion. And this was painted in the 1400s, 1437 or 38. Dorothea Tanning uses a distorted scale. So we've talked about surrealism quite a bit, and an artist may deliberately distort scale to create an abnormal or supernatural effect. So Tanning makes the sunflower huge in relation to the interior architecture and female figures. By contradicting our ordinary experience of scale, she invites us into a world unlike the one that we know. So imagining, kind of as Claes Oldenburg does, imagining an everyday object as gigantic and out of place puts us in this dreamlike territory and enhances the importance of this flower here. So this painting is from 1943. Next, let's talk about proportion. Proportion is the relationship between sizes of different parts of a work. So this is a Buddha sculpture from the 15th century, Thailand. Proportion would be the head in relation to the size of the torso, in relation to the size of the arms. And these Buddha sculptures were made with ideal proportions or perfect proportions because the Buddha is seen as the ideal example of how you should live. Proportion is the relative visual size within an image or figure. Changes in proportion can enhance or diminish an object's function. So here we have teapots. These are 3 different teapots. You can imagine this teapot is probably very awkward to, I think this is the spout. This is another teapot with a heart and chains. These 2 teapots are made by a sculptor named Richard Nacken. As you can see here, this is a light bulb, dice. So depending on how the object is proportioned will play into how well it functions. Through different ancient civilizations, they have different versions of what the perfect proportion was and how you should measure it. In ancient Egypt, the palm of the hand was a unit of measurement. We have here, this is 4 fingers equals 1 palm, 4 palms equals 1 cubit. 4 cubits should be 1 man's height. So that's 24 palms high in the ancient Egyptian system. The ancient Greeks investigated the mathematical basis of beauty and ideal proportion. To them, these proportions embodied the perfection of the god. So we'll see in ancient Greek their proportion system as well. This is the Nigerian Ife artist, the figure of Oni, 14th, 15th century, brass with lead. So this is a king of the Yoruba people, Odudugbe dynasty, presented in full regalia, so all the kingly amenities. The head is 1/4 of the body. So the head is 1/4 the size of the entire body. This is an idealized feature because it talks about the connection to the spiritual world. The divine power is in the head, life source, status, destiny, connected to spiritual world. So the head is the head is oversized. The Yoruba people believe it is the seat of divine power. Exaggerated head communicates status, destiny, and the spiritual world. So dividing an image into thirds is a way to create proportional harmony. We have a 2D image and we just divide it with this type of grid. It's often considered visually appealing if there is a focal point placed at one of the intersection points of the rule of thirds. So this is dividing it this way and this way is a strategy for creating ideal proportions. This is by William Turner, 1800s, also referred to as the golden mean. The golden section
is a proportion of 1 to 1.618. Occurs in many natural objects. Real human bodies do not have these exact proportions, but when applied to statues, they give naturalistic results. So this is the golden mean. The rule of thirds is slightly different than the golden mean, but the golden mean is another way to divide up your picture. This one's divided up into the rule of thirds. But you'll see that there's also an aspect of the golden mean here too. So this is the golden mean. You can divide a picture up or a body or a building using this ratio. This is a statue of Poseidon from 460 BCE made of bronze. So as a Greek god, Poseidon had to have the perfect proportions. That's what the Greeks believed in. The sculptor applied a simple ratio using the head as a standard measurement. The body is 3 heads wide at the shoulders and 7 heads high. So opposed to the Egyptians who used the palm and the cubit, the Greeks used the head to get their ideal proportion. So here's the 7 heads, 3 heads wide, and this is a 1 to 1.618 ratio. Other people say that 8 heads are the ideal heads, but heads have become a common measurement for the figure. The Greeks believed in this canon of proportion, so they think that that was the perfect idealized body, and all the other bodies would be deviated from that perfect canon of proportions. This is a sculpture by Polykleitos, who also did the Venus de Milo. Very famous sculpture in the Louvre, has no arms. They broke off long ago. Leonardo da Vinci, of course, made the Vitruvian Man off of this Greek canon of proportions. The 7 heads high, 3 heads wide. Let's look at Giacometti. Instead of having correct proportions, Giacometti stretches the proportions and elongates them to create this almost alien look. And Giacometti was getting at the idea that when you see a person that you don't recognize, they just become a form to you, sort of an alien or unfamiliar form, opposed to a person that you know and see, that you can understand their character. The golden section is used in the Parthenon. Golden rectangles have a proportion of 1 to 1.618. Nested inside of each other, the shorter side of the outer rectangle becomes the longer side of the smaller one. So you can see this divides into this, and here, take a look at this little video to see how it works. The Parthenon, which was created in 447 to 432 BCE in Athens, Greece, is considered to have the perfect proportions for a building, and it has been copied and utilized many times over and over. It has also become a symbol of democracy, so democracy and perfect proportions. And then lastly, let's look at Henry Peach Robinson, Fading Away. Robinson fused many different photographic negatives to create a new image. So this is a couple of different photographs combined together. Right hand drapes divide the photograph into golden rectangles. The spiral draws our eye to the dying young woman. If you can create this spiraling sense of proportion, it will draw our eyes on a path towards a focal point. So, and we will talk about more about focal points and proportions in our next lecture, but that is all for proportion and scale. All right. Thank you.